They left her to die alone, but a rancher changed her fate forever. She was not always alone. There was a time when her life looked normal from the outside. She had a small job, a rented room, and people around her who smiled and laughed with her. But life slowly changed, the way it often does, quietly, without warning. Problems came one by one, and she tried to handle them the best she could. She worked harder, slept less, and trusted people who promised help. She believed words too easily because she wanted to believe someone cared. Her name did not matter to the world anymore, but she remembered it every night when she lay awake. She had grown up learning to be strong. She learned early that no one would save her, so she learned to stand on her own. Even when her parents passed away years ago, she did not fall apart. She cried, yes, but then she kept moving forward. She told herself that life does not wait for broken hearts. But strength can only carry someone so far. Her health started to fail slowly. At first, it was just tiredness, then dizziness. Some days her hands shook so badly she could barely hold a cup of water. She still went to work because missing a day meant losing pay, and losing pay meant losing her room. Her boss noticed she was slower, weaker. He did not ask if she was okay. He only said the business needed someone stronger. That was the day she lost her job. She told herself it was temporary, she would find something else. She always did, but weeks passed and no one called back. Bills piled up. The room owner knocked more often. Friends she once helped began to disappear. Calls went unanswered. Messages were read but never replied to. People who once said you're like family suddenly became very busy. She tried not to feel hurt. She made excuses for them. Everyone has problems, she told herself. Everyone is tired. One night she felt worse than ever before. Her body felt heavy, like it no longer belonged to her. She called the only person who had promised to help her if things got bad. He answered after a long time. His voice sounded annoyed, not worried. She told him she was sick and scared. He said he would take her somewhere safe, somewhere quiet where she could rest. She wanted to believe him. They drove for a long time, leaving the city behind. The lights faded, replaced by long dark roads and open land. She asked where they were going, but he said not to worry. Just a little farther, he told her. When the truck stopped, the air felt colder. The place was silent, empty. He said he needed to check something and told her to wait. She sat there, weak and confused, watching him walk away. Minutes passed, then more. Her phone had no signal. When she tried to stand, her legs failed her. She realized then he was not coming back. Fear filled her chest, but she had no strength to scream. Tears rolled down her face, not loud, not dramatic, just quiet tears of understanding. This was it. This was how people disappeared. Not in big moments, but in small ones where no one was watching. The night felt endless. The ground was cold beneath her. Every breath hurt. She thought of her childhood, of mornings when her mother brushed her hair, of dreams she once had. She wondered how life could go from full to empty so fast. She did not ask why this happened. She was too tired for questions. She only wished someone would see her. Hours passed. The stars slowly faded as morning approached. Birds began to sing somewhere far away, unaware of the woman lying alone near a fence, barely moving. She was no longer afraid. Fear had turned into something quieter, acceptance. She closed her eyes, not knowing if she would open them again. At that same time, a rancher began his day like any other. He had lived his whole life waking before the sun, guided by habit more than clocks. His hands were rough from years of work, his face marked by sun and wind. He lived alone on land that stretched farther than most people could imagine. Silence was his companion, and he had learned to live with it. As he drove along the fence line, checking for damage, something caught his eye. At first he thought it was an animal. Then he slowed the truck. Something about the shape felt wrong. He stopped. When he stepped out, he saw her. A woman, pale and still, lying where no one should be. His heart tightened. He had seen hardship in his life, but this was different. He knelt beside her and looked closely. She was breathing barely. He did not think. He did not question. He did not wonder whose responsibility this was. He acted. He took off his jacket and wrapped it around her thin body. He lifted her carefully, as if she might break, and placed her in his truck. The clinic was far, but he drove faster than he ever had on those roads. His hand stayed steady, but his mind raced. He spoke to her softly, telling her to hold on, even though he did not know if she could hear him. She drifted in and out, unaware of the turn her life had just taken. At the clinic, people rushed to help. The rancher stayed nearby, quiet, waiting. When a nurse asked who he was to her, he paused. He could have said nothing. He could have left. Instead, he said, "I found her. She's not alone." Those words mattered more than he knew. She woke up later, surrounded by light instead of darkness. Her body still hurt, but she was warm, safe, confused but alive. When she opened her eyes, she saw a stranger sitting quietly in the corner, hat in his hands, waiting like he had nowhere else to be. Their eyes met. She did not know his name. She did not know his story. But for the first time in a long while, she knew one thing clearly. Someone had chosen not to walk away. Morning had barely broken when the woman finally opened her eyes again. Her body was stiff, her muscles sore, and every movement reminded her of the exhaustion that had brought her to that place. The bright white walls of the small clinic were unfamiliar, and the quiet hum of machines and soft footsteps of nurses made her realize how completely alone she had been for so long. It was a strange, almost unreal feeling to be surrounded by people who cared enough to notice her. The first thing she saw was the rancher sitting quietly in the corner. He looked out of place in the sterile room, his rough hands folded over his knees, his hat resting on the chair beside him. He was quiet, patient, and there was a calm strength about him that made her feel safe even before she could speak. She wanted to thank him, but the words stuck in her throat. For so long, she had not had anyone to thank, no one to speak to, and now, all at once, the reality of his presence made her nervous. "Good morning," he said softly, not looking at her directly, just letting the words fill the room. There was no pride in his voice, no expectation of gratitude, just quiet acknowledgement that she was still here, still alive. She tried to sit up, but her body protested. Pain shot through her back and arms, reminding her how vulnerable she had been. Tears welled up, not of sadness this time, but of relief. Relief that she had survived the night. Relief that someone had cared enough to save her. And relief that the world, though harsh and unforgiving, still held kindness. The rancher noticed her movement and came closer. He did not rush her or make demands. He simply offered his hand, steady and patient. "Take your time," he said. "There's no need to hurry." She hesitated, unsure if she could trust him, unsure if she could even trust herself. But slowly, painfully, she took his hand and allowed him to help her sit up. Once she was settled, the nurse approached with a warm smile. She explained what had happened, while the woman drifted between exhaustion and awareness. The rancher had found her on the side of the road when no one else had. He had acted without hesitation, without question, and without thinking about who she was or what she might give in return. The woman listened quietly, overwhelmed by a mixture of gratitude and disbelief. People often left her behind, ignored her struggles, or pretended not to see. And yet here was a stranger who had acted because it was the right thing to do. The days in the clinic passed slowly. Every day she woke to see the rancher sitting in the same corner, sometimes reading, sometimes just watching her with a quiet attentiveness. He never pried, never asked questions she was not ready to answer, and never judged. He simply existed as a reminder that she was not alone. She found herself beginning to look forward to his presence, even if only for the comfort of knowing someone cared. During her stay, she learned more about him in small, unspoken ways. His hands were worn from years of working outdoors, from tending to animals and repairing fences. His voice, when he spoke, was steady and calm, like the land he had spent his life caring for. He rarely raised it, rarely demanded attention, but when he did speak, it carried warmth and authority without being harsh. One afternoon, as the sun streamed through the clinic window, he offered a simple suggestion. "Once you feel better, I have a place you can stay. It's quiet and you won't have to worry about being alone." She stared at him, unsure what to say. Part of her wanted to run, to avoid getting close to anyone ever again. She had been abandoned too many times to trust easily. But another part of her, the part that had almost given up, wanted to say yes. She wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, life could be different. "Why would you do that?" she asked quietly, her voice barely more than a whisper. He shrugged, a small smile playing on his lips. "Because no one should be left alone when they need help the most." It was such a simple answer, yet it struck her deeply. No one had ever said that to her or shown that they truly meant it. Eventually, she left the clinic. Her body was still weak, but the rancher had prepared for her arrival. His ranch was a quiet place, far from the noise of the city and the harsh judgments of people who didn't care. The small house had a single guest room ready, with a bed, clean sheets, and a window that looked out over the fields. Outside, the land stretched endlessly, green and alive, with the distant mountains framing the horizon. At first, life on the ranch was difficult. Every movement reminded her of weakness. Every task, even simple ones, required effort and patience. But the rancher never rushed her. He showed her how to feed the animals, how to mend fences, and how to handle the simple, honest work of daily life. He worked alongside her, offering guidance without pressure, correction without criticism. Slowly, her body grew stronger. Slowly, her confidence returned. The quiet mornings and long afternoons gave her time to reflect on her past. She remembered the nights she had spent alone, the fear and helplessness that had almost consumed her. She thought of the people who had promised help and then vanished. And she thought of the rancher, a stranger who had appeared when she needed him most. For the first time in years, she allowed herself to feel hope. But it was not only her body that needed healing. Her heart and mind needed care too. She had been betrayed, ignored, and abandoned so many times that trusting anyone seemed impossible. The rancher did not demand trust. He did not try to fill the empty spaces of her life with words or explanations. Instead, he offered consistency. Every day he was there, quietly helping, quietly caring, quietly existing in a way that proved trust was possible. She began to open up slowly. One evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset, she told him a little about her past, about the jobs she had lost, the friends who had left, the nights she had spent crying alone in a dark room. He listened without interruption, without judgment. When she finished, he only said, "You survived. That means you're stronger than you know." It was not a grand speech or a promise, but it was enough to make her believe that maybe her story was not over. Life on the ranch continued, and she found herself learning new skills she had never imagined. She learned to care for the animals, to tend the land, to prepare meals from scratch. Each small success, each completed task, gave her a sense of accomplishment she had not felt in years. The rancher offered guidance when needed, but allowed her the space to grow. Slowly, she began to see herself not as someone abandoned and weak, but as someone capable and worthy. There were difficult moments too. Days when exhaustion returned, when the memories of her past weighed heavily on her, when the fear of being abandoned again crept in. During these moments, the rancher's presence was a quiet reassurance. He did not ask her to explain herself, did not try to fix her instantly. He simply remained steady, patient, and available. One morning, she woke before the sun, feeling the first real sense of peace she had known in years. She stepped outside onto the porch, breathing in the fresh air, feeling the gentle warmth of the early sunlight on her skin. She realized then that life could be different. That even after being left alone, after being betrayed, after feeling invisible to the world, there was a place for her. A place where she was seen, where she was valued, and where someone cared enough to stand by her without question. The rancher appeared beside her carrying a bucket for the morning chores. He nodded toward the fields. "Ready to start?" he asked simply. She smiled, a small but genuine smile. "Yes," she said. For the first time the word felt true. She was ready to live again. Not just survive, but live. And so, life on the ranch became a new chapter. She learned to trust slowly, to find joy in small moments, to appreciate the quiet strength of routine and care. She realized that help could come from unexpected places, and that sometimes a single act of kindness could change the course of an entire life. Through the rancher's quiet guidance and patient presence, she began to understand that the world was not only full of betrayal and abandonment, but also full of people who chose to act, who chose to care, who chose to stay when others walked away. And in that understanding, she found hope, strength, and the beginning of a life she had thought was lost forever. Life on the ranch settled into a quiet rhythm, though quiet did not mean easy. Every morning she woke before the sun, feeling her body ache in ways she had long forgotten. Tasks that seemed simple at first, feeding the animals, collecting eggs, mending fences, taught her patience, perseverance, and humility. She had once thought these chores were only for people who had always lived this life, but she was learning, slowly, that anyone could adapt if they were willing to try. The rancher never pushed her beyond her limits. He guided her with gentle instruction, correcting mistakes without harsh words and praising progress without unnecessary praise. In this way, he taught her more than just chores. He taught her dignity, the quiet pride of accomplishment, and the importance of consistency. She had never realized how much structure could heal a fractured heart. Every routine, every repeated task made her stronger, not just physically but emotionally. At first, she was cautious. Her past had left scars deeper than anyone could see. Trusting anyone, letting anyone into her life had always ended in disappointment. But there was something different about him. He did not ask for explanations. He did not demand her trust. He simply existed as a presence she could rely on, someone whose actions spoke louder than words. Slowly, she began to feel that maybe trust was not a dangerous thing. It was a possibility. Evenings on the ranch were her favorite time. The sun dipped behind the hills, painting the sky with orange, pink, and purple. She would sit on the porch, watching the animals settle down for the night, feeling the wind gently brush her face. Sometimes the rancher joined her, and they would sit in companionable silence. Words were not always necessary. The quiet was enough. It was the kind of peace she had not felt in years, maybe ever. One afternoon, while helping him repair a broken fence, she asked a question she had been holding back. "Why did you help me that night? Why did you care when no one else did?" The rancher paused, hammer in hand, then looked at her with calm eyes. "Because no one should be left alone when they need help the most. That's all." She thought about his words long after the sun had set. There was no hidden meaning, no expectation, no complicated explanation. It was simple, yet profound. He had acted not for reward, not for recognition, but because it was right. And in that simplicity, she began to understand what real kindness meant. As the days turned into weeks, she discovered more about herself than she had ever known. She realized she was stronger than she had believed. She could rise before dawn, work long hours, and still have the energy to care for the animals. She could mend fences, feed hungry livestock, and keep the small house clean and organized. More importantly, she could face her fears of being abandoned, of being unworthy, of being invisible, and slowly she began to leave them behind. But healing was not only about physical strength or skills. It was about facing the emotional wounds that had been ignored for too long. Some nights, memories of her past would creep back, the people who had left her, the words they had said, the nights she had cried alone. She would sit quietly, holding a cup of tea, trying to make sense of it all. Sometimes the rancher would notice, sometimes he would not. When he did not ask her to relive the pain or explain it. He would simply place a hand on her shoulder, a gesture of understanding that spoke louder than anything else. One evening, she finally shared more of her story. She told him about losing her job, about the friends who had disappeared, and about the night she was left alone on that cold, dark road. Her voice trembled at first, but she continued. She did not expect comfort or words of wisdom or even judgment. She just needed someone to hear her. When she finished, he nodded quietly without speaking for a long moment. Then he said, "You survived that night. That means you are stronger than anything life has thrown at you." Those words stayed with her. They were simple, but they held a power she had forgotten she could feel. She had survived not by luck, not by chance, but because she had held on, because she had kept moving forward, even when the world had turned away. And now, for the first time, someone acknowledged that strength. Someone recognized her resilience without asking anything in return. The bond between them grew, not through grand gestures, but through everyday life. She learned to read the rhythm of the ranch, to anticipate the needs of the animals, to understand the quiet language of nature. She began to enjoy the work, the challenge, and the sense of purpose it gave her. It was healing in a way therapy never could be, practical, immediate, and tangible. Each task completed was proof that she could handle life, that she could contribute, that she mattered. Sometimes she would catch herself smiling without reason, a sign that she was beginning to trust happiness again. Simple pleasures, a sunrise, the smell of fresh hay, the soft nuzzle of a calf, became meaningful in ways they never had before. She learned to savor moments rather than fear the future, to appreciate the present rather than regret the past. And in this quiet transformation, she began to see her life differently. The rancher, for his part, never sought recognition or gratitude. He did not treat her as fragile, nor did he treat her as someone indebted to him. He treated her as a person capable of growth, of learning, of change. And slowly, she realized that what she had been missing in her life was not just help or kindness, it was belief. Someone believed in her ability to recover, to learn, to live fully again. That belief, steady and unwavering, became a foundation on which she could rebuild herself. One day, while mending a fence together, she laughed for the first time in months at a small joke he made about a stubborn goat. The sound startled her. It was unexpected, light, and freeing. She realized that laughter had been absent from her life for far too long. She began to see that joy was not dangerous, that happiness did not have to be fleeting. And with that realization, she started to embrace life in a new way, one moment at a time. She also noticed a change within herself. Where fear and doubt had once ruled, there was now determination and confidence. She found herself planning small improvements to the ranch, suggesting new ways to organize the animals' pens, and learning to anticipate problems before they arose. The rancher encouraged her ideas, never dismissing them, and for the first time she felt her thoughts and actions held weight. She had influence, she had importance, and it was a new and exhilarating feeling. Despite the progress, there were still nights when she felt fragile. Memories of abandonment and betrayal would resurface. Doubts about her worth would creep in. On those nights, she would walk outside, feeling the cold air on her face, and remind herself that she had survived worse than this. She would hear the distant sound of the rancher moving through the fields or tending to the animals, and that simple knowledge, the knowledge that someone was there, was enough to calm her fears. She also began to form a quiet, unspoken connection with him. It was not romance, not yet, and perhaps not ever, but it was deeper than casual friendship. It was trust, respect, and shared understanding. He never pressured her, never crossed boundaries, and never expected more than she could give. And in this patient, consistent presence, she learned the most important lesson of all, that not all people abandoned others in need, that some people would act, stay, and care, even when no one else would. As months passed, The ranch became more than a place of healing, it became home. She no longer felt the sharp sting of loneliness, the fear that she would be left behind again. She had people who relied on her, animals that depended on her care, and a mentor who treated her with dignity and respect. She had responsibility, routine, and purpose, all the things she had thought were out of reach after years of struggle. The transformation was not instant, and it was not perfect. She still had moments of doubt, moments of fear, and moments when the memories of her past threatened to overwhelm her. But each day, she learned to face them with courage, to remind herself of her resilience, and to take comfort in the steady, reliable presence of the rancher. By the end of the season, she was not the same person who had lain weak and alone by the side of the road. She had regained her strength, her confidence, and her hope. She had learned new skills, formed meaningful connections, and most importantly, had begun to trust herself and others again. Life on the ranch had not only saved her body, it had saved her spirit. And though she knew life would always bring challenges, she now faced them with a sense of empowerment she had not known before. She had survived abandonment, betrayal, and neglect, and in doing so, she had discovered a new kind of strength, a new kind of hope, and a new understanding of what it meant to truly live. For the first time in years, she looked at the horizon with expectation instead of fear, with hope instead of despair, and with the quiet confidence that life could be better than it had ever been before. And in that quiet, steady transformation, she realized that sometimes all it takes is one person willing to care, to act, and to stay, one person to change the course of a life forever. Life on the ranch had become more than a routine, it had become a place of transformation. Each day was filled with simple tasks, quiet discoveries, and small victories that slowly stitched together the pieces of a life once broken. She had grown stronger, more confident, and more capable, yet she knew that true healing went deeper than physical strength or newly acquired skills. The heart, the mind, and the soul also needed care, and that journey was far from over. Some mornings she would wake early to help the rancher with the animals. Chickens clucked softly as they searched for food, cows mooed in the distance, and the horses nickered when they saw her approaching. The work was demanding, sometimes exhausting, but it grounded her. Every chore accomplished felt like proof that she could still do something meaningful, that she could still contribute, and that her life still had value. She realized that the small, ordinary acts of care, feeding an animal, repairing a fence, tending the fields, were also acts of healing. They reminded her that she mattered, not just to the rancher, but to herself. The rancher, for his part, remained a constant presence in her life. He did not push her to talk about the past, nor did he try to rush her into the future. He simply showed up, day after day, offering guidance, patience, and quiet support. She began to understand that his care was not conditional or fleeting. He did not act out of pity or obligation. He acted out of genuine kindness, a simple belief that no one deserved to be left alone in their darkest moments. One afternoon, as the sun poured warmth over the ranch, she asked him a question she had been holding in her heart for weeks. "How do you do it?" she asked. "How do you keep caring when it's so easy to walk away?" He looked at her for a long moment, then replied, "Because everyone deserves someone to care. If I can be that person, even in a small way, then it's worth it. It's that simple." His words stayed with her. Simple, yet profound. She realized that healing did not always come from grand gestures or dramatic rescues. Sometimes it came from consistency, patience, and quiet presence. The rancher had shown her that even when the world abandoned her, there were people who would stay, people who would act because it was the right thing to do. And in that understanding, she felt a deep, unspoken gratitude that went beyond words. As she grew stronger and more capable, she also began to face the shadows of her past. Memories of betrayal, neglect, and abandonment sometimes resurfaced unexpectedly, when she was alone in the fields, when a sudden silence filled the house, or when a night seemed darker than the last. At first, these memories brought fear and pain. She would remember the cold road, the friends who had disappeared, the promises that had been broken. But gradually, she learned to face them with courage, to acknowledge the pain without letting it control her. The rancher never forced her to confront these memories, but his presence made it easier. He never asked questions she was not ready to answer, never judged her, and never treated her as fragile. Instead, he treated her as someone capable of growth, someone who could face challenges and learn from them. This quiet respect, this patient understanding, became a foundation for her recovery. She learned that she could trust herself, that she could handle life's difficulties, and that she could emerge stronger on the other side. One day, she found herself exploring parts of the ranch she had never visited before. Rolling hills, hidden groves of trees, and quiet streams stretched farther than she had imagined. As she walked, she felt a sense of freedom she had never known. The world was vast, beautiful, and full of possibilities. She realized that she no longer had to be defined by her past, by the people who had abandoned her, or by the mistakes she had made. She could choose a new path, one built on her own strength, her own decisions, and her own courage. The rancher noticed the change in her, too. He saw her confidence grow, her independence strengthen, and her skills sharpen. He did not comment, did not make a show of it, but the small nods of approval and the quiet smiles he gave her were enough. They acknowledged her progress without overshadowing it. She was learning not just to survive, but to thrive, and he was there to witness it, quietly proud. As weeks turned into months, she began to discover new talents and interests. She found joy in caring for the animals, in planting and nurturing crops, and in creating a small, orderly space in the guest room she now called her own. She experimented with cooking, learned to make preserves from fruits grown on the land, and even began to keep a small journal to track her thoughts and experiences. These small achievements, though seemingly ordinary, gave her a sense of purpose and control that she had never experienced before. With this growing sense of purpose came a realization. She wanted to give back. She thought of others who might be in the same position she had been in, alone, vulnerable, and abandoned. She began to help the rancher with outreach, whether it was assisting with repairs, organizing supplies, or simply being a friendly presence for visitors. She realized that her own experiences had given her empathy, understanding, and the ability to make a difference. The kindness that had been shown to her was now something she could pass on, and the thought filled her with a sense of fulfillment she had never felt before. Her relationship with the rancher deepened, not through romance, but through trust, respect, and mutual understanding. They shared quiet moments, honest conversations, and the comfort of shared routines. She began to see him not just as a savior or mentor, but as a companion, someone who valued her for who she was and who offered a steady presence in a world that had often seemed chaotic and uncaring. In his quiet way, he taught her that meaningful connections were built over time, through patience, consistency, and shared experiences. There were challenges, of course. Not every day was easy. There were setbacks, moments of exhaustion, and times when old fears resurfaced. She sometimes questioned whether she was truly ready to move forward, whether she could trust the stability she had found. But each time, the rancher's quiet support reminded her that recovery was a journey, not a destination. She learned to be patient with herself, to acknowledge her progress, and to accept that setbacks were a natural part of growth. One evening, as they watched the sunset over the rolling fields, she realized how far she had come. The woman who had once lain weak and abandoned by the side of the road was now standing tall, strong, and capable. She had learned to care for herself, to trust others, and to find joy in the simple pleasures of life. She had learned that strength was not just about surviving hardships, but about facing them, learning from them, and emerging stronger on the other side. The rancher turned to her with a quiet smile. "You've come a long way," he said simply. There was no praise, no ceremony, no need for grandeur, just a simple acknowledgement of the progress she had made. And in that moment, she felt a deep sense of pride, not just in herself, but in the life she was building, in the choices she was making, and in the future she could now imagine. Over time, she began to take on more responsibility on the ranch. She learned to manage the animals independently, to maintain equipment, and even to plan and organize tasks for the day. Each new skill, each accomplishment, reinforced the sense of self-worth she had begun to rebuild. She realized that her past did not define her. Her actions, choices, and perseverance did. She was no longer a victim of circumstances, but an active participant in shaping her life. The quiet beauty of the ranch, the rhythm of daily work, and the steady presence of the rancher had taught her lessons she could never have learned elsewhere. She had learned resilience, patience, empathy, and the value of consistent kindness. She had discovered that healing was not linear, that it required time, effort, and support, and that it was possible even after the deepest wounds. Most importantly, she had learned that she was not alone. The world had once abandoned her, but she had found a place where she belonged. She had found people and animals who needed her, work that fulfilled her, and a mentor who believed in her potential. And in this realization, she discovered a sense of hope that had been missing for so long, a belief that life could be good again, that happiness was possible, and that her future was hers to shape. The transformation was profound. She was no longer the same person who had been left alone on that cold road. She had become stronger, wiser, and more capable. She had learned to face challenges with courage, to find joy in small victories, and to trust in the goodness of others. And she had learned that even when life seemed bleak, there was always the possibility of a second chance, a chance to heal, to grow, and to find purpose once more. By the end of this period, she knew without a doubt that her fate had been forever changed. The woman who had once felt abandoned and invisible now stood as someone resilient, valued, and hopeful. And though life would continue to bring challenges, she now had the strength, skills, and support to face them head-on. For the first time in years, she looked forward to the future with anticipation instead of fear. She had learned that even after being left behind, a person could find a place of safety, belonging, and growth. And in the quiet, steady life of the ranch, she had discovered not only survival, but the true meaning of healing, hope, and human connection. Time passed on the ranch, and with each passing day, the woman discovered more about herself than she ever had before. The once quiet, timid, and weary woman who had been left to die alone was now growing into someone strong, confident, and full of purpose. Life had given her a second chance, and she was learning to embrace it fully, step by step, task by task. The ranch had become more than just a place to heal. It had become a home, a sanctuary, and a canvas on which she could paint a new life. Each morning, she woke before the sun, her body filled with energy she hadn't felt in years. The animals greeted her, the fields awaited her care, and the air was crisp and fresh, carrying the scents of hay, earth, and wildflowers. She had grown attuned to the rhythm of the ranch, the patterns of the animals, the subtle signs of changing weather, the quiet sounds of life moving on the land. It was a life that demanded attention, patience, and effort, and she gave it all willingly. In doing so, she found joy in simplicity, pride in accomplishment, and peace in routine. The rancher remained her steady companion through it all. He never sought recognition, never demanded gratitude, and never pressured her into anything she wasn't ready for. His presence was quiet but constant, like a lighthouse guiding her through the fog of her past. He offered guidance when necessary, support when needed, and encouragement when she doubted herself. Slowly, she realized that his quiet faith in her abilities had helped her believe in herself for the first time in years. One day, while tending to the animals, she noticed how far she had come. She could feed the livestock without hesitation, repair fences with skill, and manage tasks independently. The skills she had learned on the ranch had become second nature, and the confidence that came with competence gave her a sense of pride she had not felt in her entire life. She paused for a moment, looking at the sunrise painting the sky in shades of pink and gold, and felt a profound gratitude for the journey she had been on. She also began to realize that healing was not only about taking care of herself, it was about giving back. Her past experiences had given her empathy, understanding, and a desire to help others who might be in similar situations. She started to think about ways she could support people who were struggling, whether it was through small acts of kindness, offering guidance, or simply being present for someone who felt abandoned. She understood now that the simple act of caring, of staying when others walked away, could change lives in ways she had never imagined. The rancher noticed her growing sense of purpose. He saw how she took initiative, how she cared deeply for the animals and the land, and how she approached every task with diligence and thoughtfulness. He encouraged her quietly, offering advice and guidance when necessary, but always allowing her to take the lead. In his calm, unwavering way, he helped her realize that she was capable not only of surviving but of thriving, of creating something meaningful with her life. As the seasons changed, so did she. She learned to plant and tend crops, to prepare meals from fresh ingredients, and to organize the ranch efficiently. Each accomplishment, no matter how small, reinforced her belief in herself and her abilities. She began to see the ranch not only as a place of healing, but as a space where she could grow, create, and contribute in meaningful ways. The satisfaction of seeing the results of her efforts, healthy animals, flourishing plants, and a well-maintained ranch, gave her a sense of achievement and purpose she had never known. Despite the progress she had made, there were still moments when the past tried to catch up with her. Memories of abandonment and betrayal would sometimes resurface unexpectedly, during a quiet evening, a sudden noise, or a moment of reflection. At first, these moments brought fear and doubt. She wondered if she would ever be truly free from the pain that had haunted her for so long. But now, she had the tools, the support, and the resilience to face these moments without being overwhelmed. She had learned that acknowledging the past did not mean being controlled by it. The rancher's presence was a quiet reassurance during these times. He never asked her to relive the pain, never judged her for the emotions that surfaced, and never treated her as fragile. Instead, he treated her with patience, respect, and understanding. His steady support reminded her that she was not alone, and that someone believed in her ability to overcome the challenges she faced. That belief, consistent and unwavering, became a cornerstone of her recovery and growth. One particularly warm afternoon, she found herself walking through a field of wildflowers, reflecting on the journey she had been through. She thought about the night she had been left alone, the fear and hopelessness she had felt, and the long road to recovery that had followed. She thought about the rancher, the quiet man who had acted without hesitation, and the life he had helped her rebuild. In that moment, she understood something profound. Her life had been forever changed, not by chance, but by the kindness and care of someone who believed in doing the right thing. She had learned that life could be harsh, unfair, and unpredictable, but she had also learned that hope, resilience, and compassion could prevail. The lessons of the ranch, the value of hard work, the importance of patience, the power of consistency, and the impact of kindness had become a part of her. She carried them with her in every action, every decision, and every interaction. As her confidence grew, so did her desire to take on new challenges. She began to help plan the day-to-day operations of the ranch, organize tasks efficiently, and mentor others who visited or worked alongside her. She found fulfillment in seeing the results of her guidance, in watching others succeed under her support, and in knowing that she could make a difference. It was a role she had never imagined for herself, but it suited her perfectly. The bond between her and the rancher deepened as well, not through words or grand gestures, but through shared experience, mutual respect, and quiet companionship. They worked together, laughed together, and supported each other through challenges. She realized that their connection was built on trust, understanding, and the simple knowledge that someone would always be there, steadfast and reliable. That connection, more than anything else, helped her understand the true meaning of belonging. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, she stood on the porch and looked out over the ranch. The animals were settled, the fields glowed in the fading light, and a peaceful calm filled the air. She thought about how far she had come, from a woman abandoned and alone to someone strong, capable, and valued. She thought about the moments of doubt, the nights of fear, and the long journey of recovery. And she realized that she had not only survived, she had truly transformed. In that quiet moment, she understood the full impact of the rancher's actions. He had done more than save her life. He had given her the tools, guidance, and support to rebuild it. He had helped her see her own strength, believe in her own worth, and embrace a future she had once thought impossible. And in return, she had grown into someone capable of giving back, of caring for others, and of living a life full of purpose and meaning. As days turned into weeks and weeks into months, she began to envision a life beyond recovery. She dreamed of expanding her skills, helping more people in need, and perhaps even starting small programs to support those who had been abandoned or forgotten. She realized that her experiences, painful as they had been, had given her empathy, insight, and resilience that could now be used to help others. She wanted to become a source of hope, just as the rancher had been for her. The rancher noticed this change and offered gentle encouragement. He did not push her, did not take credit, and never made her feel obligated. Instead, he guided her quietly, celebrated her successes, and allowed her to lead. Through his patient mentorship, she realized that leadership and compassion were not mutually exclusive. They could coexist, and when they did, they could create profound impact. Eventually, she became a central part of the ranch's life. She managed daily operations with skill, cared for the animals with dedication, and became a steady, reliable presence for anyone who came to the ranch. The rancher continued to support her, but she had grown into her own strength, capable of making decisions, solving problems, and facing challenges independently. She had become not just a survivor, but a leader, a caregiver, and a person of influence. Looking back, she could hardly recognize the woman who had been left to die alone. That night by the side of the road, the fear, the hopelessness, the sense of invisibility, it all seemed like a distant memory. Her life had been rewritten by the quiet, consistent kindness of one man, and by her own determination to embrace the second chance she had been given. And in that realization, she found peace. She had learned that life could be cruel, but that kindness could prevail. She had learned that one act of courage, compassion, and action could change a life forever. She had discovered her own resilience, her own strength, and her own ability to make a difference. The ranch had not only saved her, it had transformed her. She had grown into someone who could face life's challenges with courage, embrace opportunities with confidence, and extend compassion to others in ways she had never imagined. She had become a living testament to the power of hope, resilience, and the human capacity for growth. And as she stood on the porch, looking out at the endless fields, the golden light of the setting sun bathing the ranch in warmth, she understood something profound. Life would always have its hardships, but with courage, patience, and kindness, it could also have its miracles. She had been abandoned once, left to face the world alone. But because of one person's unwavering care, she had found her path, her purpose, and her future. Her fate had truly been changed forever. She smiled, not for the first time, but for the first time with complete understanding. She was alive, she was strong, she was capable, she was free, and most importantly, she was no longer alone.